In the quiet depth of history, moments of upheaval and turmoil etch themselves into the collective memory of nations. In October 1983, a Caribbean island stood at the threshold of such a moment. The echoes of an assassination are reverberating through the annals of time.
Grenadians will never forget the events of October 19th, 1983, the day when Maurice Bishop, Prime Minister and leader of the New Juril movement, together with colleagues Jacqueline Kreft, Eunice Whiteman, Evelyn Bullen, Evelyn Maitland, Keith Healing, Norris Bain and Fitzroy Bain, were lined up against a wall at Fort Rupert St. George's by members of the People's Revolutionary Army and shot in cold blood.
This is the resilience of the Spice Isle. I'm Rupert McCaskey. Thanks for joining us. Episode 13 ended with Maurice Bishop and others having journeyed that last mile of the way on Wednesday, October the 19th, 1983. Agnes Agatha Alexis stood by as both an ear witness and an eyewitness to a number of those events that led to what is arguably one of the more defining moments in the history of Grenada. She bears first-hand accounts of the occurrences that shaped the island's destiny.
Somebody said bring him to the fort. That's what I learned afterwards. So when I opened my eyes and I didn't see anybody, I said, okay, then I heard a little noise coming from up a hill. I walked up that tree by Barclays Bank to look up towards the fort. And that is when I saw a little school girl. She was coming down with a skirt in her hand, and she just had blood, like blood, running down her legs, and her shirt, the white shirt, had blood, and she was coming down the ball, and she, two hands was in the air, and she, which is skirt, and she was in, and she was just bawling, and oh, and this kind of, and then somebody took her. When she reached in the bottom of the hill, somebody took her, and they went down Young Street. I remember that. So then that's when I know something was happening. And then I started to hear, bow, 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 bow. And all the time I was alone because my friend disappeared. Everybody disappeared to me. So I was just in this wilderness myself, standing by Barclays Bank. Nobody was there, like nobody up to now. I find that so strange. And I was just standing, and after the schoolgirl came down with blood, and somebody went with her. And then they started to say, they're shooting Maurice up there, they're shooting Maurice and him up there. And then more people started to run down the hill, coming down the hill. And then that's when I said to myself, okay, well, Agnes, maybe it's time for you to doff out. So I remember going back. By that time now, no buses. Because everybody got wind that something terrible is happening. And went down to the market, no bus. So now we were staying in a place called La Mode at the time. So we had to, it was a good look at distance. But so I now had to walk. I didn't see, now when I jumped, in the beginning when I joined that crowd, I saw two of my sisters there because they were walking in town. So they took that throng of people from the market. I remember seeing them, both of them in the crowd. We jumped together for a while, and of course they disappeared because everybody moving and milling. When I left Barclays Bank and I went back down to the market square, I saw no bus, I saw no people. So then I realized I'll have to walk home. And then when you walk in, you realize it's in like a one people who cry, nothing, you know, they kill Maurice, they kill Maurice, kill Maurice. And to me, all I had to know was to get up home. I didn't see my two sisters, but when I got home, I saw one home. We didn't see the other one, but a while later when she came up, she was coming up, no skirt. Thank God she was wearing half sleeve that day. So she said she didn't know what happened to the skirt. Because she was on the fort, and when they started shooting, she had to jump and run. So in running, she don't know what happened to the skirt. The skirt probably hooked somewhere and fall. Because she remembered, she passed from one place and she busted one place, and then she saw a soldier in the step, and so that was her side of that was her story. She had a horrible experience because she was right on the fort. My other sister was on the fort, but she at that time she was a nurse, so she was in the room with Maurice before the shooting started. She said before the thing started, well, they didn't know that was going to start, but one of the nurses said, let us go to get them some tea. So they were going back to their hostel, in the nurses' hostel, to get a kettle to bring the tea for Morris, but they never got, because by the time, she said by the time they got to the bottom of the hill, the shooting started. So Morris never got the tea and they never got to go back.
We went into the School of Nursing and immediately I started hearing shots going off. And we were really scared. We were like in shock. And I mean, it may sound very silly now, but we actually had big textbooks over our heads. And we were like walking around in the classroom trying to find a place of refuge with textbooks on our heads. And then we ran from the School of Nursing over towards Casualty. And you were hearing all the shooting, shots going off and so. And then I started seeing soldiers being brought, bloody faces and that kind of thing. And then I remember I ran and hid in the pediatric ward because I was really scared. So, well, I left matron, I left the nursing tutor and everybody else up in that room. And so by the time I got to the pediatric ward to hide, and the shots started continue going off, and then there was smoke. I don't know what they were burning, but I started seeing smoke coming from the fort.
Once they started firing, Morris would have been in this building, yeah, along with Senator, along with Ann Peters and others. A woman whose name is Aphis Ferguson and Gemma Belmar. And once that starts, you have persons dying literally. Gemma would have ended up with a bullet through her head.
Gemma Belmar was a student at St. Joseph's Convent in Grenville and would have been part of the demonstration that went up to Paul's Airport together with the St. Andrew's Anglican Secondary School, better known as SAS. Gemma Belmar would have also been there on the 19th of October. Gemma Belmar would have been inside of the room where Maurice Bishop and him was, together with Norris Bain, who was the Minister of Housing, and his wife. Her name is Annie Bain. I was told by Annie Bain's son, the late Peter Bain, that his mother had Gemma Belmar in her hand, hugging her, holding her up. When they started, after I was hospitalized, and they ordered them out of the building, that she was holding on to Gemma Belmar, bleeding from her forehead. I was even told that she got a direct bullet in her forehead. I did want to see Gemma Belmar, who I have known before, and she didn't even know me. No, she didn't even know me. She spent 17 days in the hospital, and she later died. She died. She didn't die on the fort, as most people would anticipate. No, she didn't die on the fort. She died in the hospital, and she was given a proper burial. Yeah, she was given a proper burial. And I think, too, that it is because Annie Bain had Gemma Belmar, armed, and they wanted Annie Bain to remain, and she said to the soldiers and them, I was told by her son, Peter, that his mother told the soldiers and them that she's going to come back and join her husband. And they asked her if she's sure. She said, yes, I will come back and join my husband. If you only have to kill him, only have to kill me too. And they tell her, all right, she can go with Gemma. Later on down, they had to hide Annie. The soldiers, I was told, came into the hospital looking for her, and they couldn't find her because they hide her. Because she knew too well if she had gone back up on the fort, they would have executed her just like her husband. Because her husband was one of them that they lined up against the wall to and shot up.
From Ann Peters, my interview with her many months ago, she said, if this just collapsed and all you saw was blood all over the floor, she said she started screaming, and Senator actually grabs her and says, stay down. And eventually the firing calms down, and Morris is saying, stop firing on the people. Oh my God, they turned the guns on the people. Stop firing, stop firing. There are women and children in here. And she says eventually she's coming out, and she sees when a soldier would have taken Morris and others away from here now. So they're moving out of here and they're heading this way towards the parade square. Yeah? And she got out and was able to make it down to the hospital side.
For a matter of fact, there was a guy named Parji Cherubin who was a sergeant, and he claimed that he came up with the white flag from the room where Morris Bishop was. And he called on one of the soldiers he knew that came up with the APV, and he said, comrade, we have no weapons, we're coming out, hold fire, hold fire. So that was done, and everybody then came out from the room. Some were led outside, some was allowed to go, and those that were identified as key players
were moved at gunpoint from base level of the fort up about 30 flights of stairs to the parade square, lined up and executed, including Prime Minister Morris Bishop and Jacqueline Craft, Unison Whiteman,
Evelyn Bullen, Evelyn Maitland, Keith Healing, Norris Bain and Fitzroy Bain.
I was working at that time. As a matter of fact, my wife, at that time when she was 9 months pregnant, and I was planning now, when I heard Bishop was released, he was supposed to come to the market square. And I was waiting in the market square, waiting for Bishop to come down. Then my wife, who worked in the south of the island, came and met me there. And of course she was pregnant and she said she wanted to go home. And that's how eventually I went home. And while there, maybe about half an hour, 45 minutes after that, because we lived in a place called Richmond Hill, maybe about 2.5 miles from St. George's on the fort. But you still could have looked down and see the fort. And then we heard the submachine gun. So I was saying maybe they're celebrating the release of Morris Bishop, not knowing those were the same guns that were turned on the Prime Minister, and he was executed.
This is the second time this has happened in Grenada's history, that the government, if you want to put in a loose word, would have been lined up and executed.
A white flare was shot across the carronage towards the forts on the other side of the bay. I asked Leon James that some years ago, I said, what does that mean? And he said, well, the matter is finished, the job is done, or whatever it was.
It was interesting because a friend of mine who was there with me told me, let's go up on the fort after Bishop had passed. And I said, I don't like crowds, I'm staying right here. When he comes down, we will see him, I'm not going up there. And up till today, we still joke about the possibility that we could have been on the fort as well. But we stayed in the market square. And then we started to run. Again, heading up to a place called Mount Parnassus, where I lived at the time. Just started to run on the waterfront. Saw this guy who was from St. Paul's as well. We knew each other very well. And he said, where are you going? I said, I'm going home, because by this loud explosion now, we knew something had happened. We were not sure what, but something obviously had happened. And nobody was waiting to find out what, obviously. So he stopped, jumped into his vehicle, and he dropped me in Tempe, Mount Parnassus.
Between leaving the pediatric ward and getting back down to the entrance of the general hospital, I heard this rumor that they would come looking for the nurses who were in the demonstration. I don't know how true that was, but that's what was said. And I remember going to St. John Street, which is close to the general hospital. I went to a friend's house to get clothes so I could change to walk home. But I didn't find, she was not there. I did not get any clothes. So all I did was like remove the cap, remove the white lapel, the white collar, remove the shoe, I borrowed a slipper, and I remember going home just in the plain blue dress, because that's the uniform, the nursing students, that's the uniform we wear.
The night when I got back home, no, and then the night, I mean, everybody by the radio now waiting to hear what is the result of this shooting, and then this terrible news came in this somber, sad way, and then you hear this announcement.
And that piercing announcement came later in the afternoon. The bearer of the news was the head of the Army, General Hudson Austin.
Morris Bishop and his group fired on the soldiers, killing 2 members of the PRA, Sergeant Dorset Peters and Warrant Officer Raphael Mason, and wounding several others. The Revolutionary Armed Forces were forced to storm the fort, and in the process, the following persons were killed: Morris Bishop, Unison Whiteman, Vincent Noel, Jacqueline Kraft, Norris Bain, and Fitzroy Bain, among others.
They had to call this list of people that were killed on the fort. And I remember my sister just broke down and she started to cry. And that night, the whole place was so still in this strange way. It was just, you just know something wasn't right. It was not just an ordinary shooting. It was just like, you shoot all the leaders of the country, so who's going to lead us now? That is the kind of thing. It was just this sad. And then people were crying, and you heard the neighbors shoo because nobody, as though everybody was scared now, they want to talk loud, so you hear the this grumbling from the neighbors because you were close, and you hear the grumbling there and the grumbling there, and then everybody afraid to call out to one another. And I remember that night, it was so sad.
And I remember my mother, I wouldn't say crying, I would say weeping. I remember her weeping when that happened and feeling very sad and very out of sorts. At 11 years old, trying to process what does this all mean?
I wanted just to examine the execution of a prime minister. If someone get killed, like what may happen in Barbados, what may happen in Carrick, what may happen in Trinidad at any time, the police would then go out to look for the person that did the execution, or the assassination, or the murder of that person. If someone kills a police officer, it is enough reason for the entire force to rise up and want to see the death of that person. For you to execute a minister or the prime minister, there are several things that must happen. Nobody execute a prime minister without getting order from the highest person in charge. Nobody execute a prime minister without that person or a team of them are already willing to take on the mantle of the leadership. You cannot execute a prime minister by accident. It must be planned, it must be sanctioned. So in several, they say, when you heard about Commander Taylor in Africa that executed the former prime minister, he was already prepared to take charge of the army. In Niger, they arrested Bazoum. The leaders that arrested Bazoum, they were ready to take charge. Anybody that give the order to execute the prime minister, they are ready to take charge, or they have a group of people that are ready to take charge. Who was in charge? You execute a prime minister and there was no call for the arrest of, no call for investigation of. There was 6 days in between before there was an invasion. It meant that it was sanctioned. Who was the person in charge to take control of after you execute the leader? One man had to be in charge because the RMC, the Revolutionary Military Council, had selected 2 leaders. So if one gets executed, the next one is in charge. And the next one in charge must give the order to execute the prime minister. Nobody execute a prime minister, line him up, execute the prime minister and other ministers by accident. No common soldier. If it happened by accident, then the rest of the army would hunt down that person and ensure that they are arrested. If that did not happen, then it was planned. It's just basic common sense. It was planned. And there was this saying, people believe, give greedy and 8 days, they would rant and rave and then they would forget everything. And that was the thinking that Morris Bishop, who was the leader, people would forget him after a period of time. They would rant and rave and then the whole thing would be forgotten. And so Morris Bishop was executed on the basis that he didn't follow the dictates. And some of the accusation that was labeled him that he was a womanizer. For matter of fact, Bishop, he was a cigarette smoker. He was ill-disciplined. He had petty bourgeois tendency. He was not strictly a disciplinarian in order to follow the dictates of the Revolutionary Council. And so you find the death of Maurice Bishop, and that is what it is.
There is a theory of conspiracy, and you would pick it up. There's been over 400 books, articles that have been written about the Grenada Revolution. And in quite a number of them, you would find this conspiracy theory. And the conspiracy theory basically says that the whole implosion of the revolution and how Maurice died and so on would have been masterminded by Cord. That he would have gotten the support of the younger members of the government, and they would have looked up to him as senior. They would have respected him, and they would have followed or taken their lead from him. So that's one of the theories. That same theory speaks about the fact that prior to the actual revolution itself, there was a group that would have been formed by Bernard Cord called Orel, and a number of members of Orel, including Liam James, including Ewart Lane, would have been the ones who were pushing for joint leadership at the Central Committee. So that's where some of this theory comes from. Along with that conspiracy theory is the closeness of the living arrangement between Prime Minister and Deputy. It looked as though one was spying on the other, and that Maurice's every move was being watched, because there's this conspiracy to, get rid of him eventually. It has been raised on several different occasions. I think the last book that I would have read actually mentions how do they call it? It's like a generational connection in terms of Cord and his father, and that his father would have been a civil servant back in the day, worked very hard, was not well respected because of the, color, colonialism and all of that, and that his, I wouldn't say the word underachievement, but his inability to basically rise to power because of color and would have been transferred. This is one of the theories I'm just reporting, would have been transferred to Cord himself. And him now being in a position where all the shackles of colonialism have been broken, and there is an opportunity to rise above, to take charge, to take control. He finds this opportunity and tries to take this opportunity. And that's some of the conspiracy theories that have been raised about the issue between the two. And it's normal to try and find answers to the questions, thinking in terms of the fact that these two gentlemen would have been friends. They would have been in the struggle for quite some time. They knew each other's strengths, they knew each other's weaknesses. So why does it come down to a situation where they're on opposite sides of the divide? So it's understandable of persons trying to figure out, well, what happened? What possibly could have gone wrong that you ended up in this situation?
Maybe they were too good. They just took, licks. They never hit anyone. They loved the people. They gave all that they had for the people of Grenada. I would honestly say what Maurice has done in 4.5 years was never done by any other government. Whether they remained there 10, 20, or 25 years.
I think at that time he felt totally and completely betrayed, because he was a person who needed to have a spirit of camaraderie around, and that he got on with everybody. He was not a petty man, malicious, spiteful,
conspiratorial or anything like that. He was a whole person. In fact, his greatest strength perhaps was his greatest weakness, because he made no enemies. And in that sort of atmosphere, deviousness and treachery, I think, must have overcome him at that time.
I saw for the first time in Morris Bishop a Grenadian who was prepared to try to bring all forces together, regardless of the political views, regardless of the strata, to try to take a nationalistic approach in developing Grenada, and most important, to improve the quality of life for the majority of Grenadians.
I think it was extremely sad because Morris was beloved. People had loved Morris Bishop. A lot of Grenadians were not aware of the infighting that was taking place. That was really kept under wraps in how bad it was. Even for some persons that were ardent lookers, the fact that it was so bad inside, and maybe most Grenadians were not aware. So when it was revealed that Morris got killed, a lot of Grenadians that even started getting disenchanted with revolution still had a love for Morris. So when they learned that Morris get killed, Grenadians were, wow, this was crazy. This was, you know, really, really madness. So for others, it was a mix. It was mixed because remember, the prison was filled with a lot of detainees, and some people were looking forward to the release of their friends, their family members, their fathers, their brothers, their sisters. I mean, things was so bad at that time in the prison that there were actually one or two people that I know of. She was christened in the prison. There are people that was born in the prison. Yeah. Children that was born in the prison because of the random arrests, particularly a large number of people from the Tivoli and the Montreach area were in the prison.
This journey of remembrance contemplates the fragility of power, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring quest for justice in the face of adversity. Resilience of the Spice Isle. I'm Sherwood McCaskey.